And good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Senate Government Operations Committee on Thursday, January 23rd. We have a couple of things to do today, actually three. The first of which is to go over the executive order number 01-25 and begin at least the discussion of that. We're going to be joined, and Tucker, please feel free to join us at the table, by our legislative counsel, Dr. Anderson, to go over, first of all, I guess the constitutionality of executive orders, and maybe in particular this one. And then, as I understand it, if we don't do anything and we just sort of leave it hanging, it will become law in 90 days. There is some discussion and maybe disagreement about whether both chambers need to do something or not.
Oh.
Well, I guess depending on, well, I'm sure
Well,
Tucker will get into that at some point. But anyway, my plan would be to at least take it up. And if the votes are the way they need to be to get it to the floor, we'll move it to the floor and then either pass it or not pass it there. And I assume the House will be taking a similar look at this, although you're in a better position to tell me whether they've even taken this up or not. So with that as sort of a prelude, welcome in, Tucker. It's great to see you, and floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel, appearing for the Office of Legislative Counsel. So first, Mr. Chair, is that the order that you would like me to approach today's discussion?
I'm going to leave that up to you totally, because you're much better versed at this than I am. We don't get that many executive orders in Vermont. There are other places where that seems to be a lot more popular.
I suppose what I'll do is follow the outline that you set out.
Okay.
We're talking first about the statutory basis for issuing an executive order to reorganize a state agency, which is what the proposal is before you. I'll talk about that statute. I'll discuss some of the opening clauses used in the executive order, which will tee up a discussion about the disagreement between whether this needs to be a unicameral disapproval or whether it is required to be a bicameral disapproval. And that discussion could go very nuanced and very deep, especially around constitutional analyses. So upfront, I will say that the executive order does not present a constitutional argument or a constitutional challenge. It just has some assertive claims about how the General Assembly must carry out an objection to this reorganization. So I want to couch that and in all fairness say that there are not constitutional arguments raised in the executive order,
Okay.
but we will touch upon them. So to begin, the statute that is relied upon for these sort of executive orders is 3 VSA section 2002. And under that section, the governor is authorized to propose executive order changes in the organization of an administrative agency in the executive branch. And I'm emphasizing executive branch because later we'll talk about some of the issues that have been raised with this section. And that's an important term to remember, that are not inconsistent with or will supersede existing organizations provided for by law. What does that mean? It means that these EOs that are reorganizing a state agency are permitted to supersede statute, right? That means that these EOs are law-making executive orders. They are changing the meaning of a law. They are superseding a statute.
They trump statute as a.
So I want to make sure that the bucket, we understand the bucket we're dealing with here is the lawmaking bucket. This is not enforcement. This is lawmaking.
This is superseding lawmaking.
So I have a separation of powers question. Isn't lawmaking the jurisdiction of the General Assembly, not the executive branch?
Yes, and we will continue to unpack some separation of powers issues as we move along, because the statute also sets up There are colorable arguments on both sides of this. That this also establishes a separation of powers issue for how this lawmaking authority can be effectively vetoed by the General Assembly, which is not the branch of government that has that authority under the Vermont Constitution. Thank you for raising that now.
Of course, I'm here to serve.
So continuing through subsection A in this section, it states that the EO shall be submitted to both houses. That's step 2. It needs to be presented to the General Assembly before January 15th of the year in which the General Assembly sits. It becomes effective unless disapproved by resolution of either house. Either, not both. The statute says expressly either house within 90 days. So either chamber has 90 days to adopt a resolution disapproving of the executive order, or else it goes into effect. That is the, effective veto power we're discussing here. And this is also where the conflict between the assertions in the executive order here and the statute come into plain sight. Because the whereas clauses at the beginning of this executive order assert that disapproval must be expressed by both houses of the General Assembly. So there is an express disagreement between the way that this is presented to you in the executive order and the statute that authorizes the executive orders, which tees up some of the legal analysis and potentially constitutional analysis about what may be presented here. There have been cases interpreting unicameral disapproval at the federal level by Congress. The U.S. Supreme Court has determined in a few instances, but one primary case, the Shada case, Shada v. INS, that unicameral disapproval is unconstitutional, and a context where the House had a disapproval power over executive branch action, specifically orders related to deportation from the Attorney General. Now, I flagged the buckets that we're dealing with before, because in that case, you had one chamber of the legislative branch having the power to object to an action, an enforcement action of an executive branch agency. And the reason there are disagreements about how this statute is written and what the constitutionality may be is it is not directly applicable to the way this is structured. And the way that 3 VSA section 2002 is structured, the executive branch is playing a lawmaking role. You have delegated to the executive branch a little piece of your legislative authority. And when they return the proposal to use that power, the guidance and the channel that you have created in this delegation is that disapproval can come from either of the chambers. Now, there is actually an issue if it was bicameral disapproval. I'm going to pause for a second, try to bring us all back to middle school or high school math. When you started to learn about multiplying negatives,
Right.
did it make sense when a negative times a negative suddenly became a positive?
No,
Not initially until you learned the logic behind why that is the case, learning about grouping numbers and things like that. So
Didn't learn
This-
that part.
this branch and its constitutional authority has the power to create law bicamerally, and that is approval. Approval is the power of this branch, and it comes through both chambers. That is what the presentment clause of the Constitution essentially sets up. Both chambers act to approve, to create law. When we are talking about disapproval, we are now in the negative tense, right? If the requirement was for bicameral disapproval, that means that if one chamber approves, the law comes into effect upon the approval of one chamber. But if you have one chamber disapproval, that means that no affirmative lawmaking action can take place unless you have agreement for the approval between the two chambers, which in this case is essentially set up as inaction. You can either both vote to approve, or you can both stay silent and it becomes effective 90 days later.
So it's no different than a bill that maybe comes from the House, but then dies because it doesn't make it through the Senate.
But it is an
Yes.
interesting interplay with confirmations.
Now,
I will point out, because we have and it's a disapproval, and then the one where we're exploring at the moment, of course, is,
Can we say no?
can we say no? So in this case, I'm just curious, if we disapprove, is the administration or executive branch required to abide by that? Because it was when we had a couple of executive orders about before COVID, and one involved liquor and lottery.
Correct.
And there was another one, and we disapproved one, and I can't remember it, and they abided by it, but I don't know if they're required to abide by it.
I will step back and say that we don't have any judicial decisions surrounding this statute, the exercise of this power, which is why, again, can't say affirmatively that any of this is unconstitutional or that there are any particular issues. Can just say these are the arguments that can be made about how this operates. So noting that, I will say that there is a history of unicameral disapproval that has been abided by the executive branch, including the disapproval of the merger of the Lottery Commission and the Board of Liquor Control.
Right.
Hope that's what it was called at the time. But that unicameral disapproval was followed immediately by a bill that
Did unify them, which,
reorganized those two
right,
agencies.
right.
So the other constitutional issues that could be triggered by this are whether or not we have a valid delegation of legislative authority in the first place. Can the General Assembly delegate the ability to supersede statute to a co-equal branch of government? If so, is there sufficient guidance here under the more strict standards that are evolving from US Supreme Court decisions over the last 2 or 3 years? That is all up in the air. And, I pointed out that in subsection A, we have a lot of terms used here, but it refers to reorganization of the executive branch. We do not have a unified executive branch. So this purports to grant authority to the governor to propose the reorganization of, for example, the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General, who are independently elected constitutional officers in the executive branch. So this statute has a lot of funky things going on. The one part of this, I know I listened to the committee's initial questions about this from last week, and there were some questions about constitutionality. So I wanted to make sure that we passed over it because I'm certain you've heard much of this before. I just wanted to refresh your recollection.
So I have a question about bear with me, it might be a little windy, but last year the legislature made some attempts to do some changes to constitutional officers. Can the administration constitutionally just go in and say, we're actually going to change how these constitutional officers function? Or is that, we can't do that. Can they?
So the bounds of, I know what you're talking about, some of those independently elected constitutional officers. It will depend on what the text of the Constitution says about those offices, and any lawmaking that has to take place around defining, for example, the duties, let's say salaries, pay of those offices, would have to come through this branch of government.
And through a constitution, not legislation.
This delegation and 3 VSA 2002, this delegation of legislative authority does purport to allow the governor to reorganize the executive branch, which I'm just noting is broader than the agencies the governor controls.
So the governor can do those reorganizations of constitutional officers that the legislature would need a constitutional change to do?
you are only permitted to delegate your own constitutional authority. So if the General Assembly cannot do something, it
Then the
would
governor
be
can.
impossible for
Right.
you to delegate it to a co-equal branch of government.
Okay, so the.
We can't delegate an authority we don't have.
Right, yeah, I'm just trying to understand the interplay.
I got with you just at the end there, so hopefully
Thank you.
hopefully that last part was a good answer.
But may I just tag
Yeah.
on to Tanya's? The legislature did try and do this already. We got it, I can't remember what the progress was. We got it through the Senate, I believe. didn't we?
It was in bill form, and yes, it came out of this
Committee.
committee. And I believe went to the floor, but I don't think it went any further.
What happened to it, Tucker?
I will balk and say that not only was that not a bill I worked on, but I was blissfully on paternity leave.
Oh, that's
at the
right.
time. So I
So
have a
Tim-
lot of catching up to do on Tim Devlin's portfolio, and I will return to that and
Okay, because
you know what I find later.
what's interesting is where with liquor and lottery, we had the executive order, which then prompted the bill, which then prompted the task force, and we ended up unifying liquor and lottery, but through legislative action. This is sort of vice versa because we have spent actually several years exploring creating an agency of public safety.
Right.
And it's completely topsy-turvy. So it's,
Allison, I know what happened to that. It was not last biennium, it was the previous biennium. It did come out of the Senate and it died in House Government Operations
Oh, because
we
you were-
didn't like it.
you were on the death bill committee.
I was,
Okay. And, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I knew we had,
yes.
Brian and I both worked on that.
Yeah, I know, I remember, and I worked.
Yeah, I did.
Well,
So we've done the background on the whereas clauses to move through the executive order itself, if that is what the committee would like to do with the remaining time.
sure.
Starting with the fifth whereas clause, you have some background about the responsibilities of the Department of Public Safety and the work on the ground that is being done. I won't read through the list exhaustively, just noting that it establishes the expanding duties of public safety. And moving into the second page, the whereas clauses continue to set up the work that is done by DPS and some of its divisions. We get into the therefore clauses, which set up the substantive provisions, the operative provisions of the executive order. It begins with a few transitional provisions that would move the duties, obligations, responsibilities, and authority of the Department of Public Safety to the Agency of Public Safety. It would shift financial assets and liabilities, including ongoing appropriations from the department to the new agency. All positions, functions, equipment, supplies, and inventory of DPS to the new agency. And starting with paragraph 4 would change some of the positions here around the commissioner and the deputy commissioner to a secretary and a deputy secretary. The following paragraphs from paragraph 5 through 7 discuss the
Can I ask a sort of foundational, what is the functional difference between a commissioner and a secretary?
the cabinet level position of those two different terms and whether or not we are discussing an agency, which is higher hierarchy than a department or division. So we're talking about the officer that is in charge of higher levels of the agency hierarchy.
Okay, what does that like actually equate to? Does it equate to more responsibility, more power, more pay? What is the actual, like, what does it mean on the ground?
All of the above, you are elevating the authority of the position to have more inferior positions underneath it, to have command of the daily operations of administration of more of the governmental entity under that particular officer.
And higher pay.
Yes.
It has huge pay implications,
Oh, yeah.
as you'll recall from the Pay Act last year.
I don't recall from the Pay Act last year because it never came to our committee. It was shoved into the budget conference report.
Well, we went through it. We went through the Pay Act together, because remember, we were exploring.
Yes, and then it
Particular
didn't come
departments
to
that
our
we-
committee. Okay,
So I think it has huge pay implications.
so my sort of follow-up to that is that an expansion of administrative staff and administrative responsibility, or an expansion of actual frontline people doing the work?
That is something that we'll have to explore
Okay.
moving forward, because the executive order sets out the new structure and what the officers will be, but I think there'll have to be more detail around what the implications are for what are in the later paragraphs described as divisions, these new divisions that are being organized under the agency. Some of that's gonna have to be fleshed out. I'll tell you what's on the page though.
So of course,
So, just because we've now waded into this territory a tiny bit, do we have a fiscal note on this? Because it has, for those who don't want to grow government spending, this has actually fairly significant spending increases. And I'm just curious if we're able to ask for a fiscal note on an executive order.
I don't know that JFO has done one, but I would be happy to check with JFO to see if they have something on this and connect you with a fiscal analyst.
We could ask.
that would be helpful. And I think it just involves those two positions. I'm reading through it again, and I think everything else remains the same, but it's just reorganized differently. But I don't think there's any additional revenue pressure.
Oh, yeah, there is, because every one of the people who's a division director becomes a commissioner. There are salary impacts that will
Well,
all the way through.
What agency is the Department of Public Safety currently under? Do you
It's
see? It isn't. It's just a floating department.
a floating commission. Department, right?
Do we have other floating departments? Like, is the Department of Labor a floating department?
Yes.
yeah,
The Department of Liquor and Lottery.
The Department of Liquor and Lottery, Department of Labor, Department.
Okay, so they're not a standalone in being a floating
There are
department,
many.
not under a larger agency.
The Department of Education for many years. And remember, Shumlin elevated.
Yes. Did he do it by EO?
Yes, I think he did.
No.
No, he did it by bill. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, in liquor and lottery, but they can look bill too. So they have institutional memory.
oh, this is,
It's dense.
it is.
It is dense.
Digital Services was the most recent.
Oh, digital services was the most recent because it was a department and we elevated it. And I don't know if it was executive order. Maybe that was the executive order we did allow.
I believe so.
I think it
Later, the
was.
General Assembly had a technical correction bill that updated these statutes to comport with the reorganization.
Right.
That's my recollection, but
That is
it's
my
been where it
recollection.
changes. So my apologies if that is inaccurate.
So let's double check that.
We have
I don't want to hang our head with it.
a few minutes left unless you want me to go long. So I'd like to jump to paragraph H, which is on the third page. And I'll get back to you on some of the outstanding questions you have, both about organization of agencies and how positions shift, including some of the officers. So under paragraph A, you have a description of some of the divisions that will be set out here, which include Division of Fire Safety, Division of Law Enforcement and Homeland Security, Division of Emergency Management, Division of Administration and Finance, Division of Animal Welfare, Forensic Laboratory, Radio Technology Services, and the Vermont Crime Information Center. Each one of these is either currently a distinct division or commission that is now being brought under this agency and established as a division. Looking through this again, trying to be concise for you, the one flag that I would have where the General Assembly would likely have to act if you want this to move forward, is any instance where rulemaking authority is shifting. Rulemaking is called out under the Division of Fire Safety as having a separate office within that division, described as the Licensing, Certification, and Rulemaking Office. So I did do my due diligence on that one specific call out just to check and see if there was a specific legislative body that rulemaking authority was granted to. It was not. So the Division of Fire Safety authority here was dedicated to the Commissioner of Public Safety. So this would likely be okay. It wouldn't trigger any automatic concerns about making sure that the statutes are amended to dedicate the rulemaking authority to the appropriate body. Unless there are any specific questions about this structure, that's kind of the meat of the
So
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Tucker. It's lovely to have you back in the chair. I think this is your first time presenting to us. And can I just understand the dynamics here? Because I'm a little bit, I know some folks have had previous conversations about the implications of this executive order, but I'm just wondering, let's say we decided in this room or another legislative committee said, we actually don't think that this is a lawful, maybe lawful is not the right word, but this isn't a very well done process-wise executive order. Like not necessarily, because I don't necessarily disagree with any of the content of this executive order. Nothing's really flagging to me as majorly concerning, but I don't know. And I think that's the point of the legislature probably doing these is so that we could review this. What is the process for saying we feel that this is not properly done? Like, would it be, we'd have to introduce a bill? Would it retroactively stop what has already begun? What if you were to say, be our lawyer on this, what would you say?
What is required is a resolution of either chamber
Okay,
disapproving, and resolutions are used in other contexts to approve executive branch action. For example, the sale of state lands is something that you'll see a joint resolution for from time to time. Common, but if this committee or another committee were to review this and wanted to bring it to the Senate, it would do so by requesting a resolution disapproving the executive order. And if it was passed by the Senate, that would be the end of the executive order, at least under the statute. And unless it was challenged, that action was challenged by the governor, that would be the end of it.
and to just follow up on that, the beginning part of what you said was that technically if both of us did it, that like null and voids it kind of. So it's like only only one body should do it.
Both bodies could disapprove, but
Oh.
the requirement of bicameral disapproval would be the requirement for that bicameral disapproval that would be the issue.
Okay, so we,
Again, because it would allow one chamber to say yes, and that chamber would be controlling the enactment of law.
okay, so we really just want, if we're gonna do it, it should be one side or the other.
well, does the House side have this order and are they planning on taking it up? Do you know?
The House has received the executive order. I have not been scheduled to discuss it with the committee. I can't speak about whether or not they're going to take it up.
It was delivered to the General Assembly.
Yes, both houses.
It's both
And
houses.
Can it, when you say a committee passes the resolution, if I as an individual senator wanted to move forward with this, would I
Also
be?
propose this.
I would just say, if we don't move forward with this committee, I'd be very happy to propose a resolution on this. I'm a little shocked that we have to have this level of legal review without them being aware of, like, I'm just surprised that they're putting forward an executive order to this extent and that we have to catch that it's not functionally done through the right process. Like, that's just kind of shocking to me. But maybe I'm misunderstanding.
And I have to disagree with you on that. If the governor has authority to do an executive order, we can look at it, we can read it, we can diagnose it. But we better really think about doing a resolution before we do a resolution.
Yeah.
Really think about it for in depth.
Well,
Yeah.
Is our answer period done in the form of resolution? If we disavow or if we approve, we don't need to do anything, or we could actually do a formal approval.
May I step back to
Please
the
do.
beginning of my
Yeah.
testimony just to make sure
Yeah.
that we've been clear?
Yeah, because.
The procedure followed for the proposal of this is fine.
Oh, okay.
They have
Oh, yeah.
done what they are supposed to do. The assertions in the whereas clauses stating that both chambers have to disapprove is incorrect under statute.
Okay,
And even if it were correct, would be problematic under the Constitution.
okay. I
So
understand what you're saying.
I'm not certain
Okay.
why those legal assertions are contained in the EO, but it has been asserted in the past. And when the committee last week said, I seem to remember that there were constitutional concerns around these reorganizations. That's one of the key ones, is the assertions that are made in the whereas clauses. The procedure that's been followed
Oh,
for the
okay.
proposal of this is fine.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood
Yeah.
what you were saying. Thank you, that makes
So,
more
yes.
sense.
So I have a couple questions. One being, if the Senate or this committee or individual senators were to feel that this was too big of a change to happen without the full legislative process, and we were thus to advance a resolution disapproving, that would not stop us from introducing a bill to actually go through the full legislative process to do this.
That is correct, and that's what happened with what is now the Department of Liquor and Lottery.
Right, that's what.
The executive order was disapproved, and then a bill was introduced to reorganize the Lottery Commission and the Board of Liquor Control into a combined Department of Liquor and Lottery.
And my follow-up to that is, if we were to approve this, I thought I heard you saying we would have to follow it with legislation because there is stuff included in here that wades into the legislative body's work.
Yes,
And some, yes. There would have to be a bill eventually at minimum to correct inconsistent statute.
Right.
Because there will be statute that dedicates rulemaking authority for the Division of Fire Safety to the Commissioner of Public Safety, which would now be the Secretary of the Agency of Public Safety.
So it'd be like a technical correction though.
Yes. Although if you'll recall, even in the context of the ADS reorganization, there were provisions within that bill that were substantive in addition to technical corrections to accomplish the EO.
Thank you. I will just say, regardless of my feelings about creating the agency, this feels like significantly substantive change to be done by executive order. And I would feel much more comfortable if we had a full discussion around a bill than the density that is contained within the executive order and how many unknowns there are.
Senator Clarkson?
Well, having spent quite a bit of time on this as a bill. And I have to say, they used our material pretty fully here, in creating this executive order. I feel like our work was heavily, I'll play devil's advocate just for a sec, because I think we have 90 days. We could actually treat the executive order in some ways like a bill, in that we could take testimony on it and we could listen. We can ask for a fiscal note, we can find out what it would cost, we can talk to the current commissioner and all the division heads and reappreciate why they want this. And I mean, we could work it a little more fully, and we could do it in joint, if we wanted, in joint sessions with the House. We could accelerate what we had begun and what we had hoped to accomplish in a way with 90 days to work with, which is actually 3 months. That's a lot of time.
Mhm.
And we could actually do some of that work, and you just, we could do that if we wanted.
Yeah, I just don't feel good with the ticking clock with a change this monumental. And if we're gonna have to do a bill anyways to meet, I would feel more comfortable doing that bill.
Well, I certainly sense some unease among some of the committee members. I again pose the question, if we don't move it beyond this committee, it's kind of like a backwards sort of thing. then the potential is that it will become law. Because it didn't get to the floor for a full vote.
Right. And it's,
I'm just saying,
Yeah, but I could, as an individual senator, put forward a resolution to the whole board to disapprove the executive
that's
order.
true, you could.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course,
I sort of like to have, I mean, I appreciate the executive order is maybe a thornier way to address the subject, but I think the underlying, I think we have to separate, or at least I'm trying to separate the substance of the order with the method, with the methodology.
And I'm
Which
trying
is
to do
like-
that as well.
Yeah, which is where I think we're maybe getting, is being, which may be an issue. For me, the substance is, I voted to support the substance of this bill in the committee process. Brian and I supported, and anyone in the Senate supported it. Because we passed it fairly, maybe
Yeah.
even unanimously. I can't remember. But, I appreciate the thorniness of some of the methodology. But nonetheless, I'd still like to have a fiscal note on it because, I want all of us to understand the implications of creating an agency from a department. They're significant. And I'm wondering if anyway, so I guess I would ask the chair if we were willing to take a little more time with a little more testimony, get a fiscal note and speak to the commissioner and just get a better sense of what their hope is and why they chose to do it like this, because they could have come to us and said, we really want to approach this again. We really want this agency. Can we begin again and have a new bill? Because that could have also happened. And why did they choose this method? Which is a little more in your face. So I guess I'm sort of I've already invested a lot of time in the substance of this. I kind of like to flush it out a little bit more fully.
well, in
Like that.
anticipation of that, next week's agenda does include on Wednesday further discussion. We've only allotted 15 minutes for it, but it is on the docket, so to speak. So,
We could extend the time
Sure.
frame and
Sure.
ask JFO for something and ask the commissioner and maybe, and I know you haven't finished your testimony, so I apologize because we're jumping to action.
How many people were worked with the governor on this? Do you know?
I don't.
You don't. You know, the commissioner was part of this program. You just
You
don't.
can ask.
sorry, we have no way of knowing that.
I don't know any background about the work that went into the executive order. I discovered it at the same time it was delivered to the General Assembly. So,
Given to us at the same time.
yes.
So committee, what do you want to do? Yes.
I think you used the perfect adjective, which is unease. I have a little bit of unease with this. However, I agree with Senator Clarkson's point of view in that substantively, I really don't but based on the description from Tucker, I'm not actually super concerned about what the substance of the executive order is. However, that doesn't matter. And if there are pieces of it that weren't properly done. So I would love for us to have the discussion next week. And then based on that, I probably won't be introducing a resolution, but I'd be open to that wider discussion if it were to come.
Senator Hoskins.
I am divorcing myself of my feelings about the substance of the executive order. I actually was a no vote on that bill in the House. So, but divorcing myself from that, I have significant unease with this level of policy change happening by executive order. So if the committee, I will sit through what we hear next week, but I don't think it's going to change my position that this should be done by legislation, not executive order.
Senator Hart, do you have a
And
particular?
also feel
Sorry.
that there are people who are opposed to this that we would also need to hear from. I know that there are state employees that would be impacted by this change who do not support it.
We should hear from them.
I mean, yeah, so the moniker from the BSCA, but, just want to follow up on that. I think that's why I'm asking for a fiscal note, because it would be a fiscal and personnel. I mean, we need to fully understand the impact of an implication of this financially and people wise.
Senator, are you strongly leaning one way or another in terms of just taking it up again?
We can take it up again, yes. I'm looking at this bill and reading it. I mean, looking at this.
It's not a bill.
Not bill, looking at this paperwork here and reading it. Yeah, the public safety and going to the agency of public safety, other states have gone to agencies as well. But after doing my research on it, but I didn't do the research on this today until today. So anyways, I think this committee needs to really look at this deeper and right, we need to get some answers from other people. You know, we need to talk to the JFO. We need to figure out what the impact's gonna be financially. But at the same point, is this gonna make the public safety, agency of public safety, is it gonna make everything flow better? You know, for people like, for the fire station, for the law enforcement, for emergency management, for administration and finance and animal welfare. I mean, those types of things. The forensic libraries are going to make things move slow and better. You know, that's the one thing we don't know because we haven't talked to any of these people in the fire departments or in fire agency, emergency management. We haven't talked to them. I mean, we do have this afternoon, we got EMS companies, that type of thing. But once we talk to these people, and then we look at it and we figure, the governor probably did a lot of research to figure out how to do this. And I'm sure that he didn't do it by himself.
No, we did it for him, quite honestly.
Yeah, you guys did a lot for him. So, I don't think he did any of it with ill intent. I think he did it with somehow restructure things and make it easy to smoother. That's my.
Okay, no,
And that's what we'll hear.
in trying to be fair and open to both sides, we could certainly have the agency of administration come in and make comments about why it was done this way. I think that's only fair.
And if he is going to move, for instance, the commissioner from public safety as move her into the secretary of the agency, which makes sense. I mean, she's qualified. She does a good job. That would be great, and have her come back in and talk.
Yeah, no, I
Well, I
think
think
there's a
Sarah.
number of witnesses, yeah.
Jennifer, it was Jennifer.
No, but the secretary of the agency
Secretary of the
administration.
AOA.
Oh, yeah.
I think that seems fair. I mean,
I do too. I think we should just flush it out a little bit.
Here's some more depth.
yeah,
But I appreciate the methodology concern, and I think that's one of the questions we need to ask Sarah Clark, which is, why did you choose this method as opposed to coming to us and saying, we'd really like to have this bill again because we'd really like to
put
pursue
a
this."
bill in, yeah.
Do we
Because-
want guests in here today?
It's open to the public.
Well, okay.
Anyway, that's what's sort of
Okay,
that's what I would suggest we consider.
well, later today, we'll go over next week's agenda. It sounds as though we're not gonna be able to get this completed in 15 minutes, so we're gonna have to, take a little bit more time, I think, on that.
And
So Tucker, if you can let us know your availability next week, probably more like an hour.
I will connect with Jillian, make sure that I'm available and
Yeah,
recount
whatever day you pick.
the committee's directives for when I come back. First, connect you with JFO to determine whether a
Yep.
fiscal note has been drafted yet.
Mhm.
If not, to make sure that they're in touch with you about coming back
Okay.
a week or later. To do some research on how this might affect positions. And finally, to give you some information and feedback about other instances where there's been an escalation from department to agency.
Right.
And I think, I can't remember if Jeanette, if we had a fiscal note, I'm not remembering, one,
I don't think.
but I think it's,
I can check into that as well on the.
Jeanette will probably be in touch with us, so I swear.
Oh, did I?
Jeanette, if you're watching, just let us know. I can't remember.
Well, I think we would need a new one, just given the state of
Yes,
things
oh, absolutely.
today. I mean, we're in a really different fiscal space than we were just a few years ago.
You're here.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. We
Thank you,
appreciate your
Tucker.
work. We really do.
Have a great day.
We were scheduled to talk to Denise Riley Hughes.
Agency of Digital
I
Services.
don't know if she's out there or
And I,
Oh, okay.
and I can't remember if the name was, if it was executive order. At least, do you
Boy, I don't
remember
remember
if you
either.
were, if your agency was created by executive order or by legislation?
Both. So it started as executive order in 2017 and then was basically ratified as a legislation.
Okay.
Passed.
April 27.
So it was an executive order.
It started. that.
Yeah.
But it's not like it was converted.
I'm not sure if you can have Tucker check.
Yeah, I didn't hear the question.
So it's, if it started as an executive order, but was sort of done through a bill, was it sort of converted into a legislative process?
All of the different statute numbers will follow the trail, so you'll see like where that goes.
So lots.
Cause I,
Okay, let's move to our next person testifying, and we'd like to welcome Denise Riley Hughes, Secretary of the Agency of Digital Services. And I know you brought some guests, but we'll, if you'd like, walk around the table and introduce ourselves first.
Thank you.
Senator Larry Hart, Orange County.
Okay, Senator Rebecca White, Windsor County District. Nice to see you. I was your person, if you don't know. I have this.
she's our constituent.
Well, and also I got to introduce her on the floor.
Oh, that's right. You carried her, not her,
So I feel
confirmation.
that anything good you do somehow reflects well on me. So thank you for doing this.
I'm gonna make note of that.
Tanya Vyhovsky, Chittenden Central, and while you're not my constituent, one of my constituents who I believe works for your agency reached out after your hearing last time to effusively praise the work that you do.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I'm Brian Collin, representing the Rutland District.
I'm Jillian, I'm the committee assistant.
Thank you.
And Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
So,
So for the record, I'm Denise Riley Hughes,
Yeah.
the agency secretary for digital services and also the state's CIO, so chief information officer. And with me,
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Delabrie, Deputy Secretary for Agency of Digital Services.
And I'm John Kelly, Chief Staff, Dave Agency.
welcome all. It's great to have you with us. So we're here to hear what you want to present to us.
yeah. So there was a little bit of a generalization around what can we expect to hear from the agency in this particular committee. And while the opportunities are likely endless, I wanted to narrow in on a couple things. And I think that we sent a full slide deck just so that you would have some reading, even though you probably have thousands of other pages of things to read.
You bring that back.
I can print it if you want, or would you like me to just present it on?
You can put it up on the screen.
Oh, are you gonna put it up there?
And I'll call you to.
And it's under today, it'll be under today's agenda.
Yes, it's also on the website.
So I want to start, we'll start on page 14. We have 3 councils and boards that fall under the agency that you will likely hear information about, 2 of which we've released the annual reports on, one being the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council, the other being the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. So those 2 reports are now available, and we can have John Kelly send them up your way if you'd like to see them.
Sorry, there's our answer right there.
Oh, yeah. I knew the numbers followed in executive order, yes. So that's how we came to be. And regarding that journey, I joined the state 2 years ago. I was appointed in September of 23. And we have evaluated that period from 2017 until 23 as really our startup period. That was where one hit a pandemic, right? It was all hands on deck. Let's get everything done. Let's figure out what we have and what we're doing and what we're trying to do. And there were a lot of pretty major projects that started and were underway. But yeah, I think a lot of the agency they were working to figure out how to work together. And so this new phase with Deputy Secretary Delabrie and I, we're working on more of organizational maturity. And so we've really been focusing on truly getting the agency to work together for the benefit of not only our partners in state government, but ultimately Vermonters. So I think that we have held true to our mission and vision as an agency. And I think that this is written in a way that really focuses on where it should be focused, which is on the Vermonter and on the services that state government provides to them. So I think last time I was here, last year, there were a few of you that were on this committee. We talked about the areas of focus, which is on page 4. So the easiest way to make tech not so techy for those who aren't in this space is to bring some simplification, but also some standards to it that are a little bit more human and less nuts and bolts. And so these 4 strategic focus areas are built in a way that can easily align to the goals, objectives, and outcomes that the agencies and departments are trying to achieve for the services that they're providing to Vermonters. But also it allows us to take the technology that we're working on and really ensure that we're meeting those needs. So there's ways that we can hopefully measure this too. So user experience obviously means that we want to make tech easy for Vermonters, and we also want to make it easy for the users in state government. If we can get to a point where things just work, I think that we'd be in a really good spot. We also want to make sure too that for Vermonters, they can engage with state of Vermont and not have to worry about who they have to find to come help them, because it's going to be different every single time. So that really does tap into business process a little bit. And so we're trying.
Yes, Senator.
But sometimes we need to find out who we have to, and so we want to make it easier
Yes.
for them to find who they need to engage with.
Yes,
So
exactly.
embedded in the Agency of Natural Resources, who do I find that deals just with water and sewer? And who, you know, that.
Yes,
So I think actually we do need to find.
we do. Yes. Yes.
Senator Gaskin.
In terms of the user experience and the standards, how does language access fit into that for the agency?
That's built into the overall theme, and I will talk about accessibility a
Okay.
little bit in a way. And I think that we have come to a more global decision across the board that language, although it's not recognized under ADA requirements for accessibility, but that is something that's important to Vermonters when it comes to accessibility, and something that should be built into our services too. So if we are making things accessible, and so that is more of a term, accessible from an ADA compliance requirement is that, yes, it is. But when we say accessible, we also include language.
I thought language was covered by the ADA interpretation.
That's different. I'm talking about language like different.
No, I know, and I am too, but I don't think the ADA differentiates. So at least I know in a lot of places, they've sort of taken that to mean language broadly, but.
I think it mostly means language like Braille.
No, I know, but it doesn't actually, at least in my understanding, this comes from many years ago in case management, that the ADA doesn't actually explicitly say Braille, it simply says language access. But I appreciate that you're taking it beyond that interpretation.
The other is standards. And so coming to an agency where we have acquired a lot of different disparate systems, teams, and ideologies, we are ensuring that we've established standards, not only from industry standards, but also internal state standards around how we deploy technology, how we handle user change management, how we service the needs of the end user. All of those things fall under the standards. And then the simplifying and reducing complexity piece is really about ensuring that when possible that we can use our enterprise platforms so that we can maintain consistency, which also makes it a lot easier for supportability of the team that we have in place. So if we have the skills and we have the resources and we continue growing those and developing those around those key enterprise platforms, then the systems on the outskirts and outlying areas become less and less.
Yes,
So
Senator.
can you just clarify for particularly new members what you mean by enterprise platform?
Sure.
Sorry,
No, I'm just trying to think of how long I go and how short it goes. So enterprise platforms, right now, I think one of the standards are our productivity suite is a standard enterprise platform. So we have the same cloud service that is used throughout. Everybody can store their files in the same location. They have the same email experience when they use desktops, laptops, mobile phones. They're accessing everything in the same way. So that's something that everybody can experience. We've also done the same in case management too.
and everybody, let's just clarify, is the administration, because you are not our,
Correct. This is executive and elected offices. Yes,
but also to clarify, and quite honestly, our constituents, because Vermonters access and use your systems.
Yes.
And we do too, obviously, but you don't service our internet and technology needs.
correct. Not for the legislative branch.
Just important to clarify.
Yeah. But I like that you brought that up because if I could go back to standards really quick, that's
Yeah.
something that's important to note where we have opportunities to work together with the legislative IT organization, judiciary's IT organization to make sure that if we are employing standards, that we all have a chance to adopt them. Although they can be managed and governed by those different groups, at least we have an opportunity for consistency. The last is predictability, and that's something I think is it's an area that I am very committed to, and one that over the next couple of years, I expect that we're going to see more and more and more. One of the areas that you may hear this needing to be a focus area is IT costs going up. I don't know how much it costs, but I got a bill and that was what I was expecting. And the uncertainty of IT spend, and that's something that we have just recently put a new system in place that we are operating under with the ADS that allows for some of that predictability, both in contracting, contract expiration, renewal, what the rate of renewal is, what is the industry inflation rate, the risk that we have right now from a hardware perspective, if there's an impact on tariffs. Those are all things that we would have to think about that need to apply to the predictability of IT spend.
Right, exactly.
So I don't see us deferring to other areas right now, at least under mine and Andrew's leadership. But hopefully that helps. I'm not going to go through the strategic plan because I think that really focuses on similar things that we talked about here, and we're going to have an update to this coming by the end of next week. Feels
Following the budget?
just amazing timing. It's so great. And so this is the area that I think is good just to do a quick brief over. We are 389 positions, right, from the secretary's office on through all of the divisions. And these are the divisions that we're organized under. There was a recent change over the last year, which is at the bottom, which is our enterprise. And so we have, if you read the staff, IBS was created, how we were created, shared services is called out. Well, we have embedded shared services into enterprise services. And really what this means is this is the division that encompasses most of the technicians and engineers that support the systems that are operating across the state. And we do have folks that in some agencies or departments have dedicated assignments. So we have folks over in, that support tax because of the requirements and the compliance needs that are over there. Same with public safety. Agency of Administration has a staff that works on the existing VTHR vision system. And so in order for us to ensure that standards are applied and we're all doing the same thing and we're all supporting the same mission, they are now all part of enterprise services. So that will allow our enterprise project management office. You will see all of the, I think there's active 63 projects that are up on the EPO dashboard on the EBS website. And those will show the varying stages of completion of those projects and the status of those projects. We just recently updated that. We have a new system that aligned to some of the elements or items that the auditor had called out when the agency was audited a little bit prior to my joining. And so we had a chance to meet some of those recommendations with this new system, and you'll see in that list what exists there. But do want to hone in on something that one that you will start hearing more about, and that's the data and AI division, so artificial intelligence. We merged our data and AI. I shouldn't say we. I took our data team and I took our artificial intelligence team and I pulled them under one. And so now we have a little bit more of a comprehensive opportunity for data governance, data privacy, data policy, and artificial intelligence to make sure that we're consistent across the board. And when you look at the work that the artificial intelligence division has done, they do have a council that is made up of people from both in state and, in-state government and outside of state government that are there to recommend and provide expertise to the division around where AI is going, the needs, the impact, the requirements, and the concerns or risks to Vermonters. And so this has been really helpful having this council in place.
So I assume that in security and data management and artificial and AI, you're in close partnership with Kevin Moore and his team, just because we're all trying to protect the same people and the same systems.
Yeah.
But different systems, one state.
The nice thing is that they don't have to do anything with our systems, so
Right.
we get to be in discussions about it. But being able to have some of the knowledge there and brainstorming and what would work here and what does work, what doesn't work. We do have a lot of the teams integrating with each other around that. So, I mean, there should be collaboration among the technical staff. So we were the first state in the country to have an AI director. We have had pretty significant influence with other states around the work that we have done. So we have a code of ethics that the council was a big part of developing. We also have a user guide that is out there as well. So we have a whole dedicated webpage on the AI division and the council and the work that they're doing. So all of that documentation is published. I think what's important about that is that you're going to hear a lot more about it. We also provide inventory annually of all of the AI systems and processes that we're running across the state, and it has significantly increased over the last 2 years between the first report and the last. I think we're over 37 systems at this point. And it is doing great work, and it is all based on a human in the loop model. So there is that's built around how we approach these things. We don't think that AI is an opportunity to replace people. We don't want to be the extension of the robot. We want to always make sure that there's a human in the loop with our processes.
Yes, sorry.
So AI is a huge opportunity, and it's also, a lot of people are very concerned about it. It's also a huge opportunity. I assume you are interfacing with our other statewide offices, like elections law and AI. I mean, so I assume all those partnerships are you're working hard.
Very cool.
Yeah, I assume that. It might be interesting for us to all know, and maybe not now, but at another point, where some of the areas of AI challenge that you're facing, because enabling the things that it will enable is exciting, but I think we also need to be aware of how some of the challenges you're addressing with it. Yes, at some point.
Yes, I agree. And I think honing in on a couple of those systems that we talk about in the inventory and what they're doing and why they're doing it and how it applies to that code of ethics, because there's also in that code of ethics is an expectation of disclosure. And that really governs who we choose to work with in the tech space too. If AI as a system is being used and implemented and the user itself doesn't know that they're interfacing with
Exactly.
AI, that's a problem. That's an ethical concern. And so, yes, I would love to at some point talk about that.
So to follow up Senator Clarkson's question, to what extent do you get involved with each of the sort of pieces of government, like the Secretary of State's website or DOL's website or
DOL's under her jurisdiction, but SOS isn't.
We are the IT support arm for Secretary of State as well.
And with the auditor. And with, so you do, so unlike us, even though
Elected
you're,
offices. Mhm.
that's interesting, because they're not in the administrative branch. But you still do SOS, auditor, and treasurer.
AG.
but they're responsible for their own website and how
They're
it's set up
responsible
and
for the
everything.
content, yes.
Okay.
And if an elected office so chooses to not use our standard system, they do have the option to do that. I think for the most part, they're all using, if it's Vermont.gov, it is an ADS
Right.
supported system. Yeah,
And they all want to be Vermont.gov to go back to the simplicity piece.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I know, for instance, they just went through I don't know if it's update or whatever the proper term is. I think it was after the election that we sort of had to go back in and re-register
Yes.
candidates or elected officials. So
There was a decision made on, they knew that they had to replace the system.
yeah,
And do you replace the system before a major election? Or do you wait until it's over? And I think that the secretary made a really great decision to wait until it's after.
We appreciated that.
We were very fortunate to be partners with them at the table around ensuring cyber controls that were in place to protect the integrity of the elections. And so ADS was a member in that team to help protect the state, which was nice. Particularly behind the scenes.
the other thing that happens occasionally on my home computer, not here, but is I'll get a message that I can't remember whether it's Mozilla or whatever platform I'm using has protected you from X amount of attempted hacks. Do you sort of get that information? Like, do you know who's trying to get in when they shouldn't?
Ask for how many security hits we get a day.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
many days do we get a day?
No, millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
We have a lot.
staggering.
Wow.
We have a lot. Yeah, we actually track and trace the increase or decrease of them. So if we're seeing them wane, we will notice that, notify that. So our security division is watching everything happening on the network. They also have an opportunity to look at extensions to the network too. So they have a chance to know from an industry standpoint if there is a high risk happening in, let's say, the healthcare space.
Mhm.
A lot of this stuff is not things that we can talk about in detail.
We appreciate that.
But we work very closely with the VIC, the Vermont Intelligence Center with DPS. Our Chief Information Security Officer is meeting with them regularly. We share membership on boards together. And so security is an area that we are tracking from a funding standpoint, and also, are we investing, what percentage of the total technology spend are we investing in security? And has that increased over time, and has it not? And I don't think anybody has ever said security is non-negotiable. We've hit that point. Security is non-negotiable. There is no option to turn off security or to not monitor systems. Now it's a matter of identifying the systems that are not being monitored and turning it on. And so we've been spending quite a bit of time over the last year and a half doing that.
Yes.
So how late is it that, again, I'm always seeming to reach for examples, analogies. There's a police officer at a median and he's got radar on. And so somebody comes along and it sets it off, and out he comes and or she or pulled over, etc. And then the people that are driving the vehicles have radar detectors. And so there seems to be a constant sort of battle between who's getting smarter more quickly. If the radar detector is able to tell the driver, hey, in half a mile, you better slow down, then they'll get a ticket. But then the radar gets a little better and everybody's getting pulled over. Is that somewhat akin to what's going on with the security acts?
Well, and I'll add to that stuff, then the officer comes to you and knows everything about you and is able because of all of.
Yeah.
So they always
On the
have
windshield.
one on top
Yeah.
of whoever's driving that car because they always, by the time they get to your window, they know a huge amount about you now, which 10 years ago, they didn't even have that.
Right.
No, and so from ADS view versus security view, yes, you're right. So if I were to put my security hat on, who is always ahead of us? The bad guys.
Yeah.
So that's, from a security standpoint, that's what you'll always hear a security officer say.
Okay.
From an ADS perspective, what we're thinking about is that car, what was the last electric charging station that it plugged into? And is that electric charging station being managed and monitored and updated? Is it out of date? So, I mean, the analogy can continue on. There are things that when we put a system in place, if we're not clear on all of the different things that it does, touches, reaches, connected to, and we find out later, that can present challenges. So we really want to make sure that we've got a full comprehensive view of the ecosystem before we turn it on.
Thank you.
If just to go to our chair's initial question, if you'd be willing to get back to us and let us know roughly how many security breaches we have, or not necessarily breaches, but security challenges we have a day. I don't know what the right question is, but
Protected hats.
yeah, it is gobsmacking. I remember the first time John came in when he was the first secretary and told us, it was like, whoa.
And I think it's only increasing. And part of the reason why we're seeing it increase is because we're increasing monitoring. So we're seeing more of what's happening.
Yeah.
The other piece is when you've got folks working in various offices and possibly remote or they're traveling,
Yeah,
you're now seeing a lot more activity around.
well,
Senator House.
In terms of like monitoring those sort of, I don't want to call them breaches, but hits. Are you able to determine what is just sort of a generic bot that hits everything on the internet versus what is a more, for lack of a better terminology, kind of legitimate attempt at our specific network?
Yes, we can.
Because I'd be curious to look at that sort of breakdown as well, because I do know that there are bots out there that just sweep the internet, hitting everything.
But the denial of service attack, I think is probably what you're referring to, which is when you'll have, and usually AI is now being used to do that, where it can completely take down a website because it hits it so many times that people who are trying to go to that website can't actually render access to it. And that does happen often, but we have been working with our web hosting company to put some mitigation steps in place so that that doesn't happen at the front end, so that we actually have a layer in front of accessing the websites to try to block some of that. So I can talk about cybersecurity a lot, but I do think that that's one of those areas. I think that you'll also hear us talk about data privacy, because in order to have AI policy, you would need to have data policy. And some of that comes in from the governance standpoint. We've heard a lot about data privacy. We've talked about,
as you know, we'll have a major bill this year
yes,
again. And I assume you've been working on that.
we're very, very
With-
involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have great data privacy. Set of bills that and the data brokers this year, which will be great.
And so any of the projects, so I guess current modernization projects on page 11 is probably something that would be a good place to jump to. And so these are the 4 active projects that we have been working on through Dry Talk and through the Joint Fiscal Office. So there's the IT consultant there who we work with on a monthly basis around tracking the performance of these projects and what's happening and what's going on. The most recent one is our enterprise resource planning project.
Is that the AHS one?
That is the Workday project. That is replacing Vision, VTHR, and Vantage.
Hmm.
You'll be very happy.
I may be, but I'd be happier if the AHS was modernized as DOL. And DOL is there under unemployment,
Yeah.
but I thought it was the whole DOL.
It is the
Mainframe.
whole unemployment insurance system, which is the mainframe.
Which is the main.
Yes, so that is.
50-year-old mainframe or whatever.
Yes.
Maybe 60 years. 55. Even older than me.
With counting.
I mean, even younger
years.
younger than me.
So I
But
think that you will.
So AHS fits where?
So AHS, it was not, these are all projects that were part of the IT modernization fund. So the one-time appropriation fund that Rajat was overseeing, IE&E doesn't fall into that category. Our team is very much part of that, so we can add this to the list on what we would talk about. That is a project that we are side by side with AHS on. So we are definitely working on the technical side, the enterprise architecture side, access, and ensuring that we have those standards in place. And they are handling the service side of that, the change management, the business process.
And I have a notion of what's happened when UI will be online, at least from what I'm the commissioner. But when are you hoping the AHS will be modernized? What's it doing?
It is a journey. I don't have any. I think what the approach that they're taking is more of a layered approach. So if you rip it all out at once, it's going to be a disaster. And so they're being very methodical about how they're taking each step forward. And right now it's the systems that are bleeding or the processes that are we're struggling the most with are the ones that are getting the attention right now.
Yeah. And just Larry, for you, these are two of our agencies and departments that have the biggest federal interface and where we've had huge federal state
You said AHS, right?
agency of human service.
Yes, I would double them all day today.
Oh, are you on humans?
I'm on health.
So you're on health and welfare. That's
Well,
cool.
you might know before the rest of them.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we got all their detail about their digital stuff.
And so we were fortunate to have the deputy secretary join us who she was the prior commissioner for DEVA. And so she brings with her a wealth of knowledge in the Medicaid and health space that is really helping us when it comes to IT services.
Great.
D&B core modernization, we are really coming very close to the close to the end of phase 2, which is driver's licenses. And I believe that will be done before the end of the year. I think it's the date that they have projected, November. And it's going very well. It is interestingly enough, the same vendor, same base platform that the unemployment insurance is as well. So there's a very similar methodology that aligns pretty well with how we run projects in the state. And they are both going very well. I would say all of these right now are going well. On the network modernization project, we are in the independent review stage and in this right now, which is basically in procurement. And so I have not seen the final report. I don't even know if it's done yet. And so once that happens, I will get an invite to a meeting. They will present the independent review to me. And we will be able to move forward with the contract if it is aligned to meeting the state's needs. We've already done some pre-work on that. I think the last 2 years of flooding really helped with that, where
I was going to say some of that got jump started.
it did get jump started, which has been helpful. We had another milestone where we replaced a pretty big piece of equipment that was serving as bottleneck for network performance. And that happened 2 weeks ago. And since then, we have been operating in below 15% capacity on our network, which has been exactly where we need to be.
That's great. I'm just going to go play teacher.
Be quiet.
Oh,
I'll ask if somebody's part of that. Yeah, I'll ask, are there any other projects besides IE&E that you would want to make sure as we have a chance to meat over the course of the session that ADS should focus on.
Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was taking a look at the AI related, the like almost like code of ethics. I had it pulled up a second ago. Maybe code of ethics is the wrong word, but you had linked it in your document. It was a code of ethics. Wow. Okay. So are you updating that at all? Because that was from 2 years ago is when it got finalized. I guess the reason I bring it up is I have a lot of concerns, especially I went to the National Conference of State Legislators this year and the whole focus was AI. And I didn't go to a single one of the AI things because I was a little uneasy, to steal a word from earlier, about the overlap of AI and government services. So I didn't find those very attractive as events to go to. And I really appreciate that we are starting with a code of ethics before we even get into the conversation about what and how beneficial is it. It's like, what are the standards we have? And it seems like nationally we're starting to move more towards AI and maybe even some already conflicting perspectives compared to what I would say we have as a code of ethics. And I'm wondering if you're planning on updating it or if you have any reflections on like the national picture and that.
I definitely have some feelings. This emerging technology, in my opinion, 25 years in the industry, is the first time that we have seen at this level public sector and private sector on the journey for use, adoption, and knowledge of a particular technology. This is extremely transformative, which comes with a lot of benefits and it comes with an extreme amount of risks too.
Yeah.
And so with that, you're going to see private sector trying to monetize AI, and you're going to see public sector trying to use it to automate and improve things for efficiencies, for access. And so the code of ethics, if you read it, will show that right now it's very, very much relevant in the now. The council, I believe, is reviewing it annually. So
Oh, okay.
if it does need to happen, they
There's a
will
link
suggest an
To the
update.
code of ethics from your
Yes.
presentation.
Yes. It's only like 7 pages, so it's not insane.
You know, it's very readable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And human in the loop is something that you're going to hear a lot. We need to be intentional about our use of AI. We need to be open about our use of AI. And we also need to hold industry accountable when they turn it on. And so some of the things that we're looking at, the council is helping us on, is from a contracting perspective, what is going to protect the state and our municipalities and education when they are contracting under our contracts with cloud companies, software companies, technology companies, and all of a sudden they turn on AI and they can in their contract, but we didn't know that. And there's nothing in ours protecting us from them enabling it. And so that's where it's a little bit more in the weeds. I'm going into too much detail, but that's where we're at right now, is looking at how do we build the controls today for what we foresee happening tomorrow. Well, data privacy definitely plays a role.
Data privacy is a huge.
And then also state control, right? We want to be in control of our systems.
Thank you, sir. So you read my mind. Data privacy was a hot topic last session, and I don't believe the agency weighed in on any of the bills that we had. Perhaps you did in other committees. I'm saying, okay.
Did it committee?
Did you? I don't. Okay. I have a feeling that those conversations will come up again.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any plans to have any kind of memo or thoughts around data privacy best practices. I feel like one of the difficulties we had last session was we are so on the cutting edge as a state when it comes to even having a conversation about data privacy, and what are your rights as a citizen to your own data and the value that is generated from that data. Do you plan on putting out any kind of statement or like best practices for businesses? Because we may not have a piece of legislation that does that, but we still need leadership on this topic.
There's components of that drafted in the AI report around what recommendations look like and what do we do with those recommendations and how do they extend outside of government. I do not have a memo drafted today. I have my own personal opinion, but I think the one thing that I would always want to make sure that we're talking about is, especially if we're going to put legislation in place on emergency technology that is changing every day, what is the intent that we're after? And making sure that we align in intent and not necessarily focus on what we think was, because it will be outdated immediately.
And the AI report was delivered to technology and institution committee, and energy and
So I
technology.
shared it with them, but it was,
I think I've shared with this committee as well, because I think the original
Because
legislation
we asked for it.
had it in this committee,
Right.
actually came out of this.
It did come out.
Yes.
Yeah, but now you're next door all the time.
So it's now, it's on our reports, I think. It's under.
Yes.
If not, I can.
and we have, and yeah, John is my sender of all data.
I also just think AI isn't kind of it's emerging, but it's already embedded. I mean,
It's in use today. It's
It's
in
in
use
heavy
when we
use
don't
today.
know it. I think that the emerging piece is the growth and so the
managing the growth
sheer
of it.
compute
But it's-
resources that we'll see. We're gonna start seeing data centers popping up everywhere. People are gonna talk about quantum computing. That's all way ahead of where we're at right now. So if the guardrails and governance that we're putting in place today really center around what we've been doing so far, I think that it puts us in a strong position. The monetization piece is something that concerns me.
Thank you.
Oh, hugely. And anyway, that's a big conversation.
Yes, it is.
AI confuses me.
Well, you
I didn't
know
have-
what? You're gonna learn a lot more about it in the next
Oh, I
one.
didn't want to learn anything about it. I actually don't want to even have it in my house.
Yeah, but you do.
We don't have theories. Well, I don't
Yeah,
have
but-
theories in my house. I don't want, and if I have to go back to the old type of television, I'll go back to the old type of television. I'm getting to that point that too many people control too much of us.
You use
Right
that machine
Right there.
that is heavily already.
And all I have to do is suggest something, and the next day, every commercial I have on Facebook is that.
Oh, that's all AI.
Yeah,
It's already, you are already being influenced by it.
yeah, that's all I have to do is suggest something. I went
So
got a massage one time and they used one of those impactor, and I said, that was pretty nice little. So next day I had like 20 advertisements like Facebook of that hammer, the massage hammer.
So, I know this was just a brief overview, but I think honing in on these particular areas, I think this is where you're likely going to see us most, but happy to come in at any point.
No,
For risk of extending your stay, because I know you're already 15 minutes past your stay, and I know Drew is probably coming in as and I know we need a break. But I'd love to know, what are you most excited about at this point with ADS?
Every day.
Every day.
It's easy to get caught up in the chaos, right? And what's not working and what's not happening, but to be part of the group and teams, even with our extended agencies and departments that we're working with, it is exciting every day. I'm very glad.
I'm glad you did so.
Yes.
That's great.
okay, anybody else? No? Thank you.
Thank
very
you so much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So committee, we do need a break, I think.